Greetings. Today's seminar, we're going to talk about contract management and dealing with contractors. In our illustration, we can see the exchange of information between the owner's representative, the architect, and the builder. This building condition depicted does not represent what was really anticipated. Contract management is closely associated with construction management when we consider the general terms to fulfill a construction contract according to the terms and conditions that are specified. Poor communication and a lack of carefully worded contract can cause confusion and misunderstandings between the client or the owner and the contractor. The following presentation provides an overview of some of the more important key points to help avoid this scenario from actually happening. When we look at contract management, it requires many different tasks and skills, including recording, documenting the work, as well as living up to the terms of engagement between the parties. I stated earlier the words poor communication. This can be a downfall, thus lacking of information exchange can potentially lead to poor management and work performance. So how can we minimize the risk of this actually happening? This slide captures an overview of a report by the Primer on Construction Contracts and Risk Management from the FNNBOA website. This was produced by John Kidrowski. In many cases, a housing manager may fulfill this role, but without the necessary expertise or sometimes experience. The chief and counsel, however, may hire the services of a qualified construction manager or an architect or perhaps an engineer to work on their behalf. So when we take a look at it, some of the key points: work with the design manager before and during the construction to assist in programming the design and addressing building issues, assist in determining appropriate contract packages, assist in calling tenders and awarding contracts, program the construction work, direct the day-to-day activities of the construction contractors, process claims for payment and variations on behalf of the agency, and undertake the role of principal contractor to ensure the site complies with the health and safety regulations. Again, this is a quick overview of contract management. If we take a look at the big picture, management for a construction project, this can be broken down into 5 stages as indicated on this slide. Stage 1 being the design stage, where the design meets all codes and regulations. Stage 2, the pre-construction stage. The owner gives notice to proceed to the contractor through the bidding process. And Stage 3, procurement, contract or purchasing of all labor, materials, and equipment. And Stage 4, the actual construction. So performing the actual build, inspections, and certainly periodic reviews. In the last stage, Stage 5, the project closeout. This includes specific requirements such as cleanup, notices, documents, and turnover of documents, and so on. No construction project is actually risk-free. When we take a look at costs and certainly competitive bidding, it can present a risk sometimes to the contractor and certainly often a risk to the owner or for who the building is going to be built. So when we take a look at it, I indicated no construction project is risk-free. The bidding system basically turns the process of winning a project to get work into what some may call a sort of a poker game. In order to establish the cost to build something, we need to identify it, describe it, and certainly get prices. Thus, estimating becomes an analytical process involving many critical activities and considerations to determine the final price or the cost. The process includes reviewing plans, specifications, and other contract documents that affect the work. Competitive bidding in itself can often induce the contractor to sometimes take shortcuts in order to be a low bid, or as some may call it, the successful bidder. Okay, a few key points here. When it comes to construction work, it generally involves many things because each project is often very different and unique. As we know today, costs have risen on many materials of things that we purchase, such as lumber. Basically, the bidding system can be a gamble. Often projects become unpredictable, especially when considering the winning bid is likely to be the lowest bidder. And the lowest bids are often associated with those that may not do the best job, or at best simply be of questionable, we'll say, construction. Next, we're going to take a look at drawing up the contract. One critical step to help reduce risk is drawing up a contract, or perhaps the use of what is often referred to as a standard contract, such as the use of the CCDC contract documents. That's the Canadian Construction Document Committee's contract documents. A formal documented agreement provides, at the very least, a basis for discussion and negotiation when and if any differences do arise. I'm not a lawyer, but the words in the contractual agreement help define the expectations, the conditions, and the terms of the engagement under which the parties have agreed. As some may say, make sure to get it in writing. The objective of good contract management is to get construction work completed within certain time limits, and certainly with respect to costs, and certainly with a reliable written contract. So as we can see here, although we can say the handshake may be good for some, it may be one of the simplest ways to start for a builder, but ultimately this can lead to a lot of open issues to question. Sooner or later, more formal paperwork will be required or is required. A contract is simply a tool representing an agreement made between the parties. And certainly contracts help avoid any confusion or misunderstandings. As we can see depicted here, of course it's level. Can't you tell by the picture? Again, when we start thinking about this description of work in any contract, the single most important item on which there must be certainty is the subject matter. If a contract says, I will build a house the same as that house over there, the house must be exactly the same in every way. That's according to a legal perspective. So when we take a look at this slide, again, in any contract, the single most important item on which there must be certainty is the subject matter. Even in a small project, the detail of the subject matter with a well-written contract is important. Verbal agreements can leave too much open to becoming problematic and questionable. You might say what he said versus what she said, and so on. So it becomes obvious that it's preferable to make sure that when a contract or agreement is made, there are no inconsistencies or omissions. Let's talk about the contract list. If we take a look at some of the key items that should be described in any construction contract, they should include the following. Not all contracts contain the general concepts that are listed here, but the intent is to at least provide some ideas of a simple checklist of some of the critical items that should be considered when it comes to making a contract. It is continued on the next page. So naming the parties, contract documents, the list, terms defining specific words such as owner, install, allowance, and so on. The duties and status. So who's in charge? The job site control. Insurance and bonds, permits and fees. Who's paying for them? Are they included or not included? So again, a checklist for, you might say, items in the contract. Cost of work, it's the bottom line. Certainly in most cases, obviously lowest price, but not in every case. What about changes in work? How are those things handled? And how about the time scheduled, start and completion? Again, those can be important dates and important when it comes to considerations such as weather. Will there be subcontractors? And who are those subcontractors, by the way? Are they good, reputable subcontractors? Are they good, or have there been issues with some of them in the past? Continuing on, the application for payment, we need to describe the process, how and when, the correction of any defective work. What about termination of the contract? Miscellaneous provisions, are there any miscellaneous provisions or allowances? Will there be discounts, rebates, or refunds? And cost accounting records, how are the cost accounting and the financial management for the project being handled? And what about the owner's right to perform certain types of work, or the completion and substantial completion? What is required in order to move on and turn over the building to the owners? So who's actually in charge? So let's talk about some of these job titles and roles. So for example, the owner, the architect or the engineer, often the owner's representative, or the project manager is a contractor or the builder's representative, part of that team. And of course, we can break the list down into the estimator, the purchaser, scheduler, superintendent, project field engineer. How about accounting and secretarial, or a four-person or four-man or four-woman? So again, when we start looking at things such as this, so now that we have a contract, ultimately, who is in charge? Who should be communicating with whom? Only specific named parties to a contract have an obligations and rights defined under it. If we look at the list, I've highlighted in the color category, the reddish color, the top three: owner, architect, and engineer, and project manager. Engaging an experienced project manager or an architect or engineer can lower the risk and provide the expertise to oversee the contractor. Certainly, there are other key participants, but poor communication between the parties, as previously noted, can lead to a misunderstanding, perhaps lack of confidence in the contractor or builder. How about scheduling of work? So when we talk about scheduling, making a project work schedule forces you to build the job mentally and to consider where potential problems may exist. This is a simple one out of the CMH Canadian Wood Frame House Construction a book, in which schedule stages in typical single house construction. We can see a breakdown in the left-hand column of the different stages of construction and an average of 16 weeks for a typical house. And over that, we can see sort of a week-by-week breakdown. So again, when we come to scheduling, it helps establish a planned work sequence and rate of progress that should be anticipated on any build. So to actually schedule successfully, you need to know and understand the time frames for a project from start to finish. As we can see, separation of each task and determine the time and the work sequence that is actually required. There may be times when certain tasks can overlap, such as a plumbing, electrical, and heating contractor might be able to be on site at the same time. But certainly the painter should not be there the same day flooring is being installed. A good schedule helps everyone to estimate their work schedule, and hopefully everyone keeps to that schedule. Next, another important part of scheduling, particularly on larger and more complex projects, is scheduling of periodic meetings. When we talk about clarifying these expectations, what we want to do is right from the beginning, help minimize surprises or last-minute changes. On large projects, we would hold job meetings with an owner, an architect, or an engineer, contractor, and often the major subtrades every other week. It was an opportunity to review the work schedule, progress, and any concerns, or perhaps clarifications. So we can see here, clarifying the expectations, important right from the start, allows a venue to clear the air and get a better understanding or time to address issues or any problems or progress. Even a final job meeting can be important to tie up any of those loose ends. On the next slide, when we take a look at it, we see if we consider these primary questions once again, we get back to the terms of agreement that must be defined in a written contract. As a contractor, who will pay me? What paperwork is required to get paid? What are the terms? It will be monthly draws on demand, or in other words, a clearly defined method and process for the payment. So again, projects that require more than a few months of work to complete work, the owner often will be making progress payments. So again, who is responsible? What is required? And will it be received, and who will approve it? Simply, it must be specified in terms of the contract or the agreement documents. And of course, we may have to also consider, it may also specify a holdback or retainage fee, such as 10% of the value of the work completed for a specified specific period of time. I'm going to also talk a little bit about change order, but I also will be doing another one specifically just on change order. So when we look at changes or change orders, it can be a difficult process that involves the potential for delays and in many cases, often additional costs added to a project. Once again, written confirmation is important for all parties to ensure that the change was approved and exactly what will that cost be. So a change order modifies the construction contract. Therefore, changes in the scope of work should be documented. Best practices requires a change order form. It should identify the contemplated change. As noted, requires approval by the owner or the owner's representative, such as the architect or engineer. Requires a price adjustment to the contract. Generally, it's an addition, not always we'll say a deduction, but in some cases it may be. And it must be mutually acceptable. And certainly when we think about it, what is the impact of not just the scope, but also the impact on the cost and the time? There are several common reasons or causes for delays. Delays may be caused by a multitude of causes as listed here: weather, late shipment, late starts, equipment breakdown, strikes, or other related disasters. Again, in the contract, are there clauses in the contract that cover for any damages, actual or liquid? So for example, liquid, every day of delay would be a certain amount of we'll say, fee charged resulting from a delay. So there are several common reasons, as I indicate, for causes for delay. So if delay is under control of the contractor, then it's on the contractor. Otherwise, additional time, cost, or consideration may be warranted to any construction contract. So how about document tracking? Again, during the construction process, there's a lot of documents that changes hands, change orders, instructions, and so on. Maybe clarifications from the architect or engineer, or simple instructions from the owner. So when we take a look, the collection of documents from the prime contractor and trade contractors is simply an ongoing task. These can include a wide variety of documents, such as, for example, notifications of different equipment that's being supplied, or shop drawings, what is being built in the shop and what's going to be arriving in the field. So again, information such as that. Changes to the actual construction site need to be recorded, and so on. So when we talk about these documents, as I indicate, there can be a wide variety of documents. The most effective way to collect these documents is to give notice right from the very first site meeting that these are required, need to be collected, and in many cases will be handed back over to the owner. So we can see general requirements: contract agreement document, reporting and comparing progress with the schedule, so updates and scheduling, monitoring and measuring, for example, time and material contracts, how much material, and how much time was spent when we talk about time and material type contracts. Any modifications to the work schedule, what about costs? Or even just site meetings, changes, inspection reports, information such as that. And how about completion documents such as guarantees, warranties, statutory declarations, as built, as I indicated earlier, shop drawings, manufacturer's documents, etc. And what about people that need to consider the issue of maintenance? So the maintenance documents or operational instructions, for example, for certain types of equipment, such as heating equipment and so on. Again, when we take a look at acceptance for final payment, the acceptance of a completed project is customarily based on a final inspection performed by the architect or the engineer, and based on conditions of correction of any deficiencies identified or listed. So during the architect's review, what I'm very familiar with, we would typically do a final inspection and create what was known as the punch list. The punch list was a series of information about deficiencies, things that need to be cleaned up before the building was fully, completely, substantially complete and turned over. The issuance of a certificate of substantial completion is often required for many projects. On the issuance, contractor requests for final payment. When the architect's engineer's inspection confirms that all the deficiencies have been corrected, the owner's representative will issue what is called a final certificate of payment. So final completion requires a contractor to make good all deficiencies, as I indicated. Final completion also means final payment seem to go hand in hand. Acceptance and final payment usually constitutes a waiver that all work has been substantially completed. Let's talk a little bit about job closeout. So when we talk about job closeout phase, this is one of the most important factors in determining how our project is going to end. How a project closeout is completed can leave a lasting impression in the owner's mind of a good job, or perhaps one that was not so favorable. So if we take a look at some of those obligations, completing the punch list process, completing all those deficiencies, delivering all those required documents, removal of all temporary work and related facilities, training the owner, the clients on the various systems in the building, transferring any utilities such as utility bills and so on, consolidating all documents in a file system for the owner for future reference, and delivering as-built drawings. Again, as-built drawings, as I indicated earlier, are often when changes are made. These are modifications to the existing contract documents, perhaps showing where the plumbing lines are, or perhaps where the heating ducts are, or things might have been changed from the actual construction contract documents. Well, everyone is accountable, but let's take a look at a few of the points here. So everyone involved in a building build in general is accountable for their respective role in seeing a project completed successfully. The basic principle of project management is it should always be shared responsibility for all parties and should focus on the ideal results for the project. The contractor is exclusively responsible for the on-site safety and precautions against damage to persons and property. Taking a look at our next slide here, a breach of contract. Well, contract termination. What is breach of contract? Well, often that is termination or breach, the act of breaking the terms in a contract. Either the owner or the contractor may terminate the contract for a valid reason. As we can see listed here, these could be, or this could be, late, lack of payment, failure to complete the project, failure to start the project, or the owner stops work for less than 30 days through, or actually it's more than 30 days through no fault of a contractor, straying from the plan such as using substandard materials or non-approved materials, and certainly issues related to workmanship. Again, all these things are often dictated in the terms of agreement and the contract documents. So again, hopefully nobody enters into this situation where we have termination or breach of contract. So again, a breach of contract is a violation of any of the agreed upon terms and conditions of a binding contract. They were required to do or not do something and failed to do those things. Under certain circumstances, the owner has a right to stop the work. This may be based on significant defective work or work not being performed according to the contract documents. The other point should be fairly clear, as I noted there. Let's talk about the construction and the owner. The owner has a right to perform construction work on a project with the owner's forces and to award separate contracts for certain types of work. This should be coordinated with the prime contractor, act within the same obligations as the contractor, and not interfere with the work of the prime contractor and the subcontractors. So, however, problems may arise when the owner's contractor delays or damages another's work. So again, one of the downfalls of the potential conflict between work by the owner during the construction period at the construction site. Summarizing, when we start taking a look at the summarizing, the person in charge of the overall project is usually termed the owner and is often the only non-professional in the entire project. In some cases, they may be a professional. Managing a build project, and more so managing the builder, requires due consideration to a number of duties and responsibilities, as I've outlined here. It is generally understood that the owner has an implied duty to cooperate with the contractor to the best of his or her ability, and not to impede, hinder, obstruct, or interfere with their work. The same concept applies to the contractor. Hopefully, in such a scenario, the owner has a professional that is experienced in representing his or her interests that can deal with the vital decisions on the construction project site. Again, key role is successful completion of the project requires managing and documenting, approving, tracking, inspecting, payment, scheduling, and communication. As I indicated, project management is a very complex and can be a very onerous task. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me. It's Claude at clawrence@mnsi.net. I've offered here a few resources, Wikipedia on construction management, and the second one is specifically on construction management from the construction magazine, Construction Contract Managers, and its importance. Again, thank you, and we look forward to your future webinars on procurement, or take a look back at the ones we have created for you. Again, thank you.